Well, this is wonderful that you guys brave 115-degree weather to come hear wise words. And we're going to hear some wise words today from one of our favorite. It's very unusual to have a writer who is one of our leading customers. This guy reads, if anybody else reads as much as this writer does, you got to know it's an incredible book. And it is an incredible book. And this is launch day. And here is Tim Lupinacci.
Well, I'm so excited to be here. I'm so honored to look out and see so many friends and family, especially to be able to launch here at Alabama Booksmith. This is such a special place to me. I'm grateful for Jake's influence on my not only on my reading habits, but on this idea of everybody leads. And he was so instrumental in encouraging me along the way. And I'm just glad that a lot of my colleagues and friends get to come. Maybe your first time at Alabama Booksmith. And I know you're going to fall in love with it as much as I have, and you'll find huge, valuable treasures downstairs. So thank you, Jake, for this. And I recall 10 years ago was actually the first day that I stepped foot in Alabama Booksmith. One of our colleagues, I have several colleagues here today, one of our colleagues was launching his book, Travis Isom. Many of you remember him. He passed away a couple of years ago. But he wrote he wrote the Newspaper Boy, and he launched that here. And that was my first introduction to Alabama Booksmith. And as Ellen can attest to, I now have 5 or 6 bookcases filled with signed first editions from here at Alabama Booksmith. So I'm really appreciate you having us to do this launch today. So the moment when Everybody Leads began and the journey to the book really was about 30 plus years ago on what I thought was going to be the last night of my short legal career. I've been practicing law for about a year, and I really viewed my practice very much as a very transactional type of approach. I would get a project, I would do it, I would turn it in, and then I would go on to my next project and not really think about whatever happened with it. Well, about a year in, I got involved in a very large financial project from my boss. My boss was someone who was, could be pretty difficult to work with. You know the type, if you've had a challenging boss, he could be a yeller, didn't give a lot of feedback. And so I tried to stay out of Bob's crosshairs. But I was working on a very big project. I did my part of it, turned it into a senior associate, an older colleague, who then turned it into our boss. And as I said, I went on my way, didn't think anything of it until I got paged to go to Bob's office. And if you knew anything about Bob, you did not want to be paged to his office. So I'm a little nervous walking down the hall to Bob's office. And the colleague who I'd turned my part of the project in was standing there. And we realized pretty quickly that there was a pretty intense telephone call going on in his office. And the speakerphone was on, and it turned out there were about a dozen lawyers from across the country. Bob's yelling at them. The lawyers are yelling back at Bob. I'm looking at the other guy like, oh, this is not good. And then we realized that what they were all yelling about was the financial projections we had done, which was for a big hearing the next day. We had totally messed up. I mean, we had literally overcounted by like a couple $1 million. And they're yelling at Bob. Bob's yelling at them. But then he turned his ire at us and yelled and said, these idiots are going to be here all night and get this fixed. So I immediately had 3 thoughts going through my head kind of simultaneously, not in necessarily any order. Is 1, I'm going to be here all night to get this done. Number 2, this is going to be the last day I have a job at this firm. And number 3, it was such a bad mistake that I probably would never do any more work in the legal profession at all. Well, needless to say, we got the project done. We emailed it out. All the lawyers had signed off that we had gotten it right. And I had drawn the short stick to pick up Bob the next morning to drive him to the court hearing, which was in Montgomery. So I get him, and it's a pretty awkward silence for a while on the trip. And we got, going down I-65 towards Montgomery. And Bob turned to me and he said, I want to apologize to you. He said, I shouldn't have yelled at you in front of other lawyers. He said, but the reason that I was so angry, particularly with you, is because I see huge potential in you in owning your career. And I really need you to step up as a leader and as somebody who really is not looking to just pass things on to other people, but to really step up in your leadership and your ownership of your career and what you're doing. And that was really the first time that I remember someone speaking into me that I was a leader. And it led me on this journey now 30 years later of, well, if I'm a leader, what does that mean? And how can I be a leader if I'm just this new associate? I've got no ideas about how to lead. I don't have a title. I don't have a big fancy corner office. Well, needless to say, the hearing went fine. We confirmed the bankruptcy case. I didn't get fired. And ultimately, over the next couple decades, Bob became one of the most influential mentors in my life, and really helped me as I went along my career as an encouragement. And I was really honored when his family asked me to speak at his funeral. Really important part of my journey. And Everybody Leads is really the result of this journey. At the time, I went to the local bookstore, and the big bestseller at that time was John Maxwell's 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership. And some of you may remember that. So I got that book and I started reading it and figuring out, well, how can I implement this in my today, in my practice? And that led me to want to grow more in my leadership skills. And I read books. I'm old. I would actually listen to books on tape. Now, some of you in the room don't even know what a cassette tape is, but I was listening to books on tape. I'd go to leadership journeys, leadership conferences, and continue to get better. And one of the things that really I learned the most about was making mistakes. I make huge mistakes all the time. I have several colleagues here that will say, yeah, Tim makes a lot of fails, but he always tries to learn from it, which I do. I try to learn from the mistakes and get better. So I've tried to take lessons from great leaders that you read about in history, from a lot of the books you can buy downstairs. Don't do that, right? I've tried to take, great research that's out there, and try to make it practical for the groups I've been able to lead and how to get better at that. And so Everybody Leads really is built around this idea that the first part of the book is, how can we better lead ourselves? I want to affirm each of you in this room that you are a leader. You have influence and impact on those around you. You don't need a title. You don't need a corner office. You don't need to have the power to fire and hire people. You influence people every day how you show up in your family, in the community, in your church, your synagogue, your mosque, in how you show up at work, in school. You have influence. And so if you agree with that proposition, the whole idea of Everybody Leads is to try to provide some practical steps in how you can get better in those leadership and taking those steps that you do. And so I really hope that you will find some value in this book. I did want to take one particular story from the book just as an encouragement to you along the way. I guess you're here, so you probably already bought the book. But if you haven't, buy an extra one for your friend so Jake can. But there's a whole chapter, because I really believe it's so important in all we do as a leader, is encouragement. We all know leaders who have that superpower, and no matter how much you may be struggling in your day, they can lift you up. We all know people. Many of you are that to me. I get in your presence and I just feel better just because of how you are and how you show up. And so I've got this chapter on gratitude, and it really involves a story involving my great nephew, who actually is here, David, and his sister Megan. But when David's older now, but when David was about 5 years old, we were over at his house. We had lunch, and when we finished lunch, he wanted me to come play with him in their playroom. And it's a long playroom. It's not quite this long, but it's kind of rectangular, like this room right here. And David had me go over and get down on my knees like this. And then he goes running down to the other end of the hall, and we had other end of the room, and there's a box of toys and things like that, and he's digging around. And next thing I know, he's put on a cape and tied a cape around his neck. And then he stands up and he kind of balls up, like really to get the speed, and he starts taking off as fast as his little legs will carry him, running straight at me. And I'm like, okay, I'm not really sure what's going on. And then a couple feet from me, he pushes off and jumps into the air towards me, I think trying to be Superman. And my mind is spinning, I got to catch him. And I catch him before he hits the ground. But I'm a little nervous that he maybe shocked him a little bit. So I've set him down. And then I look and see he's got all this joy on his face and a huge smile. And he goes running to the other end of the room and says, again. And so then he balls up and then he starts saying, Super David. And he came running down towards me. And I had to catch him. There were a couple times he might not remember. I don't want to paint him, but I did drop him. But he has survived now. But over time, the thing that's so interesting about this, over time, he and Megan, his sister, I would see them. They'd be at our house, or I'd go to a ball game to see them. And both of they would yell at me, "Super Tim," and come run and give me a huge hug. And I can tell you that, no matter if I'd had a horrible, no good, terrible, bad day, if I had someone yelling "Super Tim" and coming and hugging me, I'm like on top of the world. I can conquer anything that I want to do. And what really was remarkable to me about that is that, a matter of fact, they gave me a card that says "For Super Tim" when they just walked in. The two of them, yeah, they're both super. Anyway, but it's two words. David and Megan, they don't have to schedule on their calendar and go encourage Tim, right? They don't have to, as we all are interacting with people, we don't have to schedule time and write, notes. Handwritten notes are amazing. I get them. I encourage you to do that. But two words can really encourage you on your journey. And in some instances, change the course of a career. There's some stories in the book of people who literally, someone just speaking some positive words, like Bob spoke into me, can change the course of a trajectory. So I really want to encourage you with that. And the main reason I wanted to talk about encouragement is to kind of conclude, to just say how much you all have encouraged me. Just looking across the room here is really special to me for you to be here. This has certainly been a labor of love. And I have a lot of love for each of you. You have been instrumental in my journey. Many of you have touched some of the stories in here. I didn't use anyone's last name, but I may have used some of your first names in here. But you really have impacted me, and you've helped me be a better leader and a better person. And I really want to thank you. We really, how we show up every day and how we speak, words really do matter. One of my favorite authors is someone who's passed away now. He was a Catholic priest in New Orleans, Brennan Manning. And he said that in every interaction we have as we go through every day, we either give life or we drain it. And so I really hope that I'm trying to walk through every day giving life. And you all have really given me a lot of life, and particularly as on this leadership journey. I do want to thank a couple people. I definitely am so grateful. Final words of gratitude to my wife, Ellen, who, Jake made the comment that he was disappointed when he read this manuscript for the first time because he couldn't find a typo in there, and that's because of Ellen's. Ellen, University of Montevallo, English graduates editing, made this good. And then my daughter, Lisa Catherine Evans, and her husband, Cody, thank you so much for how much you pour into me. And then I thought I would close with mentioning just a word or two about the three men who the book is dedicated to. I've mentioned Bob, who's Bob Rubin, and he really spoke leadership into me for the first time. And then he mentored and poured into me over the years, and really made me believe in myself, that I could have a career, that I could be a leader. And he just was so loyal, and he just had my best interests at heart until he passed away. So I really am grateful for Bob. Another man who has also sadly passed away is Randy Smith. I clerked for him when I was in law school. He was an entertainment lawyer in Nashville. And he was the first person who really spoke into me that I think there's a book in you. I think you should write a book. And that literally was now 35 years ago. But along the way, he remained a very important part of my life. He has influenced me through the decades to be a better person, to be a better husband, a better father, a better lawyer, and a better leader. And so I really, this book is for Randy, and really appreciate him. And then the final person the book's dedicated to is Bob Goff. Some of you know the name, best-selling author, but Bob really helped pull this idea of the leadership that Bob spoke into me, the idea of doing a book that Randy Smith talked into me, and he really encouraged me to take this all together and actually write a book and actually do it. And his love and his friendship and his guidance and his encouragement every step of the way over the last 5 years really culminated in today and launching this book. So I hope you find value in the book. I'm very grateful for you being here. And don't forget that Jake will come up and tell you a little bit more, but there's also a reception at the Valley Hotel, which is a few blocks from here, although apparently parking is miserable over there. But the drinks and the food are free, so do it. But thank you all for being here. So, Jake.
Wow. Standing room only, 115 degrees outside. I have a tendency to exaggerate, but this is no exaggeration. This is the most inspiring author chat we've ever had at this joint. And let's give him one more round. And even without being bribed with food and drink, we're grateful, Tim. This was amazing. Thank you. Thank you.